Hey everybody, it's the Trout, and welcome to another episode of the Trout Show. Thanks so much for stopping by. Today's show is about a very talented singer-songwriter. Her name is Lillian Leadbetter. Now, she's a folk singer, but more than that, she's a great artist and knows how to write a great song, but she grew up in the country. And her story is a little interesting for the fact that she didn't have internet or didn't have TV, so she kind of grew up without that. And you think about it nowadays and you think, wait a minute, how did you get by without that? Well, she talks about that. But her music reflects the fact that she did grow up in the country and she has a great way of being able to express herself in her music. And you know, Americana music or folk music is basically only started here in America. So it's great to be able to see that kind of music continue its trend and people like Lillian come out with some wonderfully talent and her music is great. So up next, you can see it. Interview with Lillian Leadbetter. But before we get there, if you like this episode, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. If you like this channel, please subscribe. So up next, Lillian Leadbetter, a singer-songwriter with her brand new album talking about state of romance and how she writes great folk songs. That's next on The Trout Show. Are you excited about your new album coming out and your release party?
Yeah, I mean, how could you not be after you put so much time and energy into it, you know?
Well, how,
I
how
have
long have
like,
you been work how long have you been working on it?
well, I've been working on the actual album itself for, I guess, almost about a year and a half now. I
Okay.
finished it this past winter and then have kind of been preparing for the release, kind of envisioning what I want to do with it. Finally got CDs in the mail. So I have these for my release party. So I'm very excited about that. I wasn't even sure if I was going to do physical prints because of the world that we live in, but there's something very satisfying about seeing things in the physical realm. So yeah, I'm very excited. Lebanon, New Hampshire, that area. I finished my high school career in that area, so I have a lot of ties there. And yeah, the Anonymous Coffee House, where I'm doing the show, is just a great organization, bringing live, free local music and free refreshments to that area. So very much looking forward to it.
So, is it you, or are you bringing a band, or what are you going to do?
It's going to be myself and a wonderful friend and musician of mine, Phil Cohen, is going to be joining me. We do like a little duo set together. We did a short tour up the East Coast from Nashville to Vermont for the release of the first single off of the album in the fall of this year, or no, yeah, spring, coming back up.
Okay.
And yeah, so usually when on the road, I do a bit of a duo setup. It's kind of crazy to try to bring everyone, including the harpist, on the road. So yeah,
Oh wow,
duo
a
duo shows for
harpist.
this.
Cool.
Yeah, there's some tunes on there with some really beautiful harp by a wonderful woman named Marie Hamilton.
So the one song that you wrote, I think it's called Sophia. Is that the one about
Yeah,
Paris?
yeah, yes,
Have
yeah.
you ever been to Paris?
I have been to Paris. In fact, the song is quite autobiographical, really. After a lovely trip with my friend Sophia in Paris, I mean, truly, I'm not embellishing that much in this song. Um, I visited her and I had a really wonderful and expansive time, and just in the broader sense, a romantic experience where we, walked along the river and we went to art galleries and churches and
Right.
drank wine in the streets and just like really experienced Paris in this way that's almost only pictured that way in movies and films and books. And so when I got home, I really didn't reflect on it that much. And then her birthday was coming about, and I realized a day and a half before, and I realized nothing that I could send her would get there in time unless I wrote a song real quick. So I
Uh,
drank like half a bottle of wine. I wrote the song, I sent it to her, and she listened to it on the train the next morning. Um, so that's kind of the origin story of Sophia. It's a happy birthday note.
so
Cool.
when
Yeah.
did you start doing that?
I think I started playing guitar probably when I was around 10 or 12. It was actually a
Okay.
little bit later. Singing really preoccupied the majority of my time, and
Ah,
I was really interested in, folk music and a cappella folk music, and I got really into choral music as well. And I was in a lot of choirs when I was younger. I really loved harmonizing with other people's voices and kind of the grandiose
oh yeah,
um,
yeah.
feeling of being in a choir. There's nothing quite like feeling your voice against
Mm,
other voices and
no,
just
there's not.
So I was really into, my dad was playing guitar, so I had the accompanist right there, and he was learning kind of after I was born, his sisters gave him a guitar for his birthday, and he always tells the story that it was not a great guitar, and they were like, "You can go exchange it if you want," and he did, and he went and got us something a little bit nicer because he knew it was something he was going to want to spend some time on and some
Right.
energy on, and I remember as a little kid kind of like creeping down the stairs when he'd start to play at night, and I'd just listen around the corner, and he started to invite me in, and I would hum along and sing along. And there's lots of home movies of me just like singing while doing really anything. I never stopped singing. So
Did your parents get to a point where you became the entertainment for when people came over? Did they ask you hey?
absolutely. I mean, I don't think that they were making me the entertainment. I think
You
I was
wanted to.
forcing entertainment on others.
Yeah.
But it was definitely encouraged. My parents are very supportive of my interest in the arts in all senses of it, have always been incredibly encouraging. No one has ever offered a doubt on whether or not I should pursue my music or
Mm.
this work as a career either. It's been an incredibly supportive um, situation for me. So I'm very grateful for that. And I definitely pay a lot of um the credit to getting started with music to that experience with my father and really like, his tolerance of like sitting down there with me. We'd run the same folk song over and over for
Oh
hours as I
yeah.
tried to figure out how to harmonize as like a
Yeah.
12-year-old. And without that, I think it was an incredibly invaluable skill for me to learn.
Let me ask you a question as you grew up, because, you know, did you get any kind of pushback from your friends? Because I assume, and it could be where you live, but I assume they were probably into different music than you were.
I mean, yeah, but I think I, in a lot of ways, was not following the traditional route
Oh,
anyways. I
obviously
was
not.
always
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
a quirky dresser, and that extended into my like somewhat antisocial behavior, wanting to like read sheet music during my free block. Like I wanted to sit there at, like, no joke, in middle school, I would be caught, holding my sheet music and sight singing to myself while everyone else was socializing and doing whatever. I really wanted to experience this music, and for sure, I mean, there was tons of people who you couldn't pay them enough money to listen to the choral music that I wanted to listen to.
Right.
And I remember freaking my friends out as a little girl, like wanting to listen to this like old Americana music where you're talking about cowboys stringing people up by the neck. And they were all like, "What is this?" Like, Lillian, this is very creepy. But I was just like, I loved folk music. I love storytelling music. That to me has always been like a tenet of what I listen to. And it's something that my father and I share a lot of love for, is really the narrative storytelling of folk music. So between that and choral music, yeah, I think my taste was a little more eccentric than most of my friends, but I also was able to, really narrow down the pool of people that I connected with through some of those things. Some of the people that I met in choir or through other musical veins have really been the friendships that have endured. Um, so yeah, I mean, it was a little different, but I'm really grateful for kind of for the separation that that gives you of kind of exploring something without the worries about what other people are thinking or
Well,
their
I think
likes.
as a creative person, you got to let that go. I mean,
Yeah,
we want
absolutely.
to impress people, I guess is the best word you could say. And you
Hmm.
want people to like your music, but then after a while you realize you can't force it on people if they don't like it. And it's the same. And the reason I ask questions like this is because the dozens of musicians I've interviewed, everybody gets bit early. It's like a
Mm,
disease we get,
mm,
and you can't and you can't get rid of it. And people that in my age bracket are still, I mean, you take the top-notch people that are still performing. David Lee Roth of, Van Halen turned 69 today. And you're thinking, and he's still playing. I mean, take Paul
yeah,
McCartney had an 80 and all that stuff. So when you get it, your disease is that.
yeah.
And the one thing, and a lot of people can't understand if you don't do that, because they don't. My
Mm.
wife was my manager of one of my bands once, and she said, "You people are weird."
Absolutely. Yeah. And I wouldn't want to be friends with someone that's not weird, honestly.
So,
It's something
so
I see as a valuable trait.
yeah, and I think and it is a valuable trait, but I can also understand you sitting there reading sheet music, because if you love something, you love it like that.
You love
And the
it.
one thing
Yeah.
about creativity is it changes all the time. And as a guitar player for a long time, I'm one of those lead guitar player guys. You never stop learning.
Yeah.
That's
True.
the great thing about it. And I know the article I read talked about it painted a pretty good picture of where you live
Hmm.
and the Appalachian Trail and the mountains up there and Burlington area and all that stuff. I would assume to a certain degree that had a huge influence. I mean, that's discussed about that. But, Burlington's not that big a city. You're kind of out in the country in the woods and all that stuff. Do you think you're I know that's true, but I mean, do you really believe that probably had an effect on you and has the ability to kind of inform you or give you some ideas about what kind of music you want to write?
Yeah, I would actually attribute the most credit to where I was from and where I was raised
Mm,
in terms of my connection with music and the subject matter of my music. So I grew up in a small town about an hour from Burlington, end of a dirt road, no neighbors, just like us in the forest, and we didn't have TV or anything like that. And my parents would always just go tell me to play outside. And I grew up in kind of an untraditional setting in which, you know, kind of the primary connection with any sort of like greater power was this concept of like, all right, Lillian, go play. Trees can talk, so can rocks, go have fun, go connect. And that was very much my idea. I'd go out and I'd assume there were fairies there and I'd assume that the trees could hear me. And I talked and I sang and I shared all of my hopes and dreams with all of those energies and entities out there. And I think that that really was where I started singing, was in this safe woodland space that kind of cradled the sound and mountains that echoed and this beauty that really inspired me to feel and want to articulate that back, kind of in a practice of gratitude.
hmm
um, and the majority of my music has been written on that land, and anytime that I'll be bringing a CD over there in a couple of days just to like leave it and show the land like what we did. This is all because it started there. So I think, even though I travel really often and I explore new places and I set up shop and home in different parts of the world and different parts of the
hmm
country,
hmm
Vermont and that piece of land where I grew up is truly, my heart. It's completely, I cannot remove it from me. Um, and it's where I go in my mind when I need peace and when I need
mm.
creativity or solace. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you must be a very good guitarist, musician, because you went to Berkeley.
Yeah,
They
I
don't.
did go to Berkeley. Yeah.
I mean, people and your degrees, which of course are really funny. I read that to my wife, anthropology and music.
Yeah.
So, so it's like,
Yeah.
okay. So when was the
Well,
bug that said, okay, I got to do this the rest of my life?
gosh, I mean, really, I think it sank in high school for me. When everyone else started applying to colleges, there was no part in my mind that understood a traditional career or education track. It just didn't resonate with me. It didn't make sense. It didn't feel like my path. I put all my eggs in one basket. I applied for Berkeley, I auditioned, and I got in. Like that was all I wanted to do. I didn't even mess
Yeah.
with any other schools because I knew that getting in wouldn't mean anything to me. It wasn't the path that I was going to choose. Um, so, I think in that sense, that's kind of where the ball started rolling. But I also think I haven't really taken it that seriously. I mean, I like to jump into the things that I have trust in and faith in
hmm
and believe to be like what is resonant with me. I think, you get your energy back tenfold when you really, really commit it to something.
hmm
And I've always had, I said earlier, I've been really empowered by my parents and by my musical community. And I felt the calling. So I went kind of into school with that energy. And when I did eventually transfer to the University of Vermont to pursue a degree in anthropology with a minor in music, it was because my interest and my curiosity was drawing me not into really the technical aspects of music and music theory. I was
hmm
starting to just have questions about the world and the way that we perceive it
mm
and the way that music impacts culture and the way that our experience impacts the way that we interpret art. All of that kind of falls under the lens of anthropology. And for me, that's where suddenly, I was answering questions that were coming up in my own poetry and music was through an anthropological lens.
mm.
So I kind of shifted my interests there, or like, found a different way to explore my interests. Um, and from there, I moved into also additional mediums of artwork that kind of fell under anthropology. Photography has been a large
Yeah, I was
focus
going
for
to
me
ask
as
you about
well.
that. There's some things talking about your multimedia situation. But go ahead. I just
Yeah.
was kind of curious about that too.
Well, and I think that that's important as a musician in the 21st century. Diversification of your art is a really big part of being someone who can be a self-employed musician. And so photography for me has been a really enabling art form to help me, save money and record, because making an album is not cheap. And so you have to really like,
Mm.
save and plan and make choices that are really going to benefit you as a musician. So the mixture of those mediums has really allowed me to give the tenderness and time and attention to the music that I want to, and to not rush it and to not force it into things that it doesn't want to be. I want to give it time. I want to give it love. I want to give it the money that it deserves. Um, so, the idea that I get all of my money and only my money for music, I would be starved. Absolutely. But again, you're going to invest like any business. You're going to
Yeah,
invest up
yeah,
front, and you're going to work for that return, and you're going to have trust in it and faith into it, and you're going to put your heart into it, and there's going to be setbacks. But I believe really strongly that, anything that is a self-investment is something worth investing in. Um, so music for me it has continued to give back. And I think, if I had learned a lesson over and over and over again that I wasn't getting fulfillment out of it, I wasn't getting any growth out of it, I would have stopped making music.
yeah.
Um, but a musician once told me that I was, hostessing in a restaurant when I was like 19, and the
Right.
manager of the restaurant was a musician and managing a restaurant. And he said to me, don't do music unless you have to, because this lifestyle is really hard.
Yes, it is.
And what I took from that was like, anytime I have any questions of doubt, I go, okay, could I live my life without music in this point? And the answer has never been yes.
Yeah,
I need music. It is
yeah,
part of the catharsis. It is part of growth. It is part of
yeah.
understanding. Um, so yeah, I mean, it wasn't really like a career choice. I never went, I'm doing music and music alone. It's more just been, I create something and I want to share it.
Your music, though, it lends itself to more of a community spirit of doing music. You don't, it's kind of like bluegrass music and Americana and folk music. It's not the kind of music that people have egos in. It's just
Mm.
let's sit down and talk a story and play,
Yeah.
and not that rock music, I mean, that's more of a singular thing. I'm going to get up and do a lead break for 10 minutes and everybody's going to be looking at me, which is
Mm.
okay, but
Mm.
still, it's not the same. So you have different people, and
Yeah.
it's doesn't drive you to, I don't know, that's what some music's supposed to be doing. And I'm glad people like you exist. I really am. Because the thing about it is, I don't want that part of America to go away,
Mm.
because it's part of it. And I bet if I was guessing, you spent some time doing historical studies of folk music, haven't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, inadvertently, just by wanting to understand what these stories about, and also just, through my father too, who has always been a fan of the history of the West and, a lot of nautical themes. We've always been kind of, into songs of sailors and ships. And
Hmm.
so I think a lot of that interest from my father and this, historical interest kind of runs in my family. And I think the storytelling aspect in music really helped get me on board with that, get me on board with wanting to learn about history and the human experience and writing about it. Like, I just a couple months ago wrote a song that is not my own personal experience, but based on a historical story of two women in the frontier of the United States, and writing from their perspective, a narrative story that was based on a true story of their life was a way to transport me to really experience that time period, to really have to vividly able, you have to have a vivid picture of that experience in your mind
Hmm.
to be able to write
Hmm.
about it, to be able to condense that experience down to sentences that convey the message and the experience. um, so yeah, history, how it's being made, how it's changing, how it was. all kind of boil down into the way that I can interpret music now, and my own kind of fantasy spin on it too, because lots of things from our history are kind of gnarly. And
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
reimagining them now, yeah, reimagining them now with my 21st century female perspective is
Right.
something that I don't take for granted. Um, it's a beautiful opportunity to kind of ingest, critique, and explore our history and lens was being used when a lot of these things were being written and listened to.
So when you got started on this album, when and you worked on it, obviously I could tell you what you did. You had to work, had to go pay to play in the studio. Did you find a producer? Did people come to you? How did you find the people to work with? You had to find a producer, obviously. I know there's a note in the information I read about you.
Well, so I'm the executive producer of the album,
Okay.
meaning that I was calling all the final shots. I did work with another co-producer, Eli Gold, who was in the larger form of the performance band that I was working with at the time. They play bass and and multiple other instruments. But we were kind of going into this studio, Future Fields, in downtown Burlington, who I had connected with via a female rapper in town, actually. And she had been speaking really highly of them and had mentioned to me that they really wanted to get more women in the studio there
Mm.
and that I should go check them out. And I met with Dan and Eric, the people that run the studio there, and they were fantastic. So sweet and so encouraging and so enthusiastic about the project. Really made it accessible to me and my vision. And the people in the community here, Eli and Ben and Connor and Marie and everyone that has been playing music with me and Phil, everyone really came together to help record this project. And everyone was really, I learned a lot through this process that I know what I want. I know what I'm listening for. I know what I want it to sound like. I know what the levels I want it to be. I know how much reverb I want. When I trust myself, really know. And that was a really beautiful experience to kind of go into it with a bit of timidness of like, oh, well, I need a co-producer because I don't really know what I'm doing and I don't know what I want. And in the end, to be like, you know what? Actually, I can make calls on all of this. I know exactly what I want. I co-mixed the whole thing with our mixing engineer as well because I had a vision for it. And I'm sure there will be critiques in the future about particular choices that I made, but they were the choices that I wanted to hear. For me, like we were talking about earlier, making music commercially viable or making it something that is an income for me is way lower on the list of importance than articulating the vision that I have. And so for me, prioritizing that vision and prioritizing what I want to hear is what I did with this record. And so being an executive producer was a really important role for me to have because I'm really making this album for myself.
Sure you are.
Yeah, and those who enjoy it, it's for them too, by extension. Um, so yeah, the process was honestly it kind of just fell into line. Connecting with the people at Future Fields and meeting other people who really understood the music and were able to I'm able to trust them as a musician to take creative liberties that expand on this idea of mine. And that's a really powerful feeling when you hear someone play a solo over a track that you've written for the first time and it just like goes right to the heart of the feeling.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
interpret your music in a way that you intended it. And I got really lucky just working with such an empathic and intuitive group of musicians.
There's some things, I say this about going into the studio. Some good things about it and bad things about it.
Hmm.
And the bad thing is you're limited on time
Yeah.
unless you have an unlimited budget. So that's the bad thing about it. But there are some things that go on and that are effective when you do it. And as a producer, the hardest thing for me, and I was in the studio last year doing a song and was trying to convey to people what you hear in your head.
Yeah.
And so you're absolutely right because and did you teach yourself? Well, which DAW did you use? Did you use Pro Tools or what was the one that he was having?
So I had an engineer who
Okay,
was running the ship, working all the equipment,
right,
and I'm in the co-pilot seat, kind of producing, making aesthetic
right.
choices and volume choices, and things
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Um, so Dan was our engineer, and Dan is one of the people that owns Future Fields as well. So fantastically qualified individual. Um, and was just, having someone turn to you and ask if you like something really reminds you that, oh my God, I have an opinion in this. I can make choices here, you know? Um, so that was a really beautiful thing to kind of feel that shift of being like, this is my vision. I get to choose. Um, and yeah, there are the stressful moments when you're like, oh my God, we have like 2 more hours in here
Yeah,
today. And I
yeah,
like,
yeah.
this is not coming together the way that I want it to. And in my experience, the way to get the results, especially when you're feeling stressed out about it, is to just release any expectation and that stranglehold on an idea and let the musician, who is a fantastic musician, who you brought
Hmm.
into this room because you trusted them,
Hmm.
let them just do whatever they want. Give them 20 minutes to just do whatever they want.
Yep.
I guarantee you that's where the best take is going to come from.
When
Yeah.
did you decide, though, that you had you wanted to start this project? Did you already have enough tunes for the complete album when you went in
Yeah,
to
I
start
did.
recording?
I did. The kind of impetus for the album was this voice memo that I received from Sophia, who we've talked about earlier from
Yes.
the track Sophia. The track that follows Sophia is the title track, State of Romance, and it is a song that I wrote to accompany this voice memo that she sent me, where
That's the
she
one I
was
listened
talking
to.
about.
That, by the way, that's the one I listened to. That's the one Heidi sent
Okay,
me.
gotcha.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Um, and Sophia kind of articulates to me that she sees in me this state of romance. And something in that wording like clicked like nothing before. And I thought, that's the name of my album. That's the concept. That's what I've been moving through in my life for the last 2 years. That's what I've been understanding. That's how I've been perceiving the world. Sophia, you have like turned the light bulb on. Um, and so I went home and I put the songs in order, and I knew in that moment I started looking into recording it. Um, so it was a really kind of immediate aha moment. I wasn't trying to do anything really. It came. That was
Yeah.
the moment it came. Yeah.
And then it took you a year and a half to do the whole project, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I think the actual recording of it was about a year, and
Yeah.
then we've kind of been like sitting on it and working on the,
The
CD
mix and all.
design or
Yeah,
whatever. And yeah, and mixing,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I wanted
What?
a big hand in mixing because
It's yours.
it's like choosing what lens you're going to shoot a picture on. It's like it is so important to the framing and the experience of the listener. And as someone who also, I have a lot of choral backing on a lot of my tracks. I
Mm.
use my background in choral music to and harmonizing to build lush layered vocals under a lot of these songs to kind of give it that padding without having to write really complex string parts, which we have a little bit of that, but I really wanted to, when I'm alone, it's me humming, it's me oohing and ahhing and singing to myself, and I really wanted to make sure that was part of the essence of the album. So yeah, that's kind of where we landed.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
And
Have a good day,
yeah,
and we'll be in touch. See you later.
wonderful. Great to meet you,
All
Rick.
right. See ya.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye.